Welcome to Worth Quoting, a program sponsored by Florida Community College at Jacksonville. I'm Kathy Clower, your host, and with us today we have Mark Mori from Los Angeles, who is an independent filmmaker. Mark is going to be discussing the program that he has produced, Building Bombs, The Legacy. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Kathy. It's good to be here.
Thank you. Would you like to give a little bit of background on the program? What is this program, Building Bombs?
Well, Building Bombs is about a nuclear weapons factory in South Carolina, the Savannah River Plant. It was built in the early 50s. It's the world's first hydrogen bomb factory, and the film is really the story of the plant and some of the people that work there.
Before we get into how you produced it, why you produced it, and some of the difficulties that you ran into, why don't we show a clip from the program to give our viewers kind of an idea of what it is about. This will run about a minute and a half.
Right.
For decades, the gentle Savannah River flowed alongside quiet agricultural fields in this part of western South Carolina. Then, the Atomic Energy Commission deemed its banks a near-perfect place to locate nuclear reactors that would heat its waters to near boiling. While these reactors fueled the arms race to keep us safe, an invisible danger grew that today threatens our health. To control this threat, we will spend over $200 billion, more than the cost of the savings and loan bailout. The danger is radioactive waste, billions of toxic gallons, miles of contaminated soil. This is the bitter fruit of nuclear supremacy, downplayed for decades. And it falls to the Clinton administration's Energy Department to engineer a solution. But given its legacy, can the department handle this daunting task? This is the cornerstone of America's aging nuclear weapons manufacturing complex, the Savannah River site, operated today by Westinghouse. But for 38 years, it was run by DuPont. Local people call it simply the bomb plant.
So the Savannah River Plant was called the bomb plant.
Right, the local people call it the bomb plant, but with some of the thick southern accents that they have, it comes out sounding like the bum plant.
The bum plant, huh?
This idea of a plane with bums falling out of it. So.
How did you get started in this? What motivated you to do this program in the first place?
Well, what motivated me was that I was living in Atlanta at the time, and a friend of mine was telling me about this Savannah River Plant, and I'd never heard of it, knew nothing about it, and everybody I asked knew nothing about it, yet it was this huge hydrogen bomb factory right in our own backyard up there, and yet it was a big mystery, so that intrigued me immediately.
Was this person an environmental activist? Is that
Yes, that's right. This person was actually organizing a protest at the plant, and in fact, the film started out with me taking a friend of mine who had a camera over there and just started filming the protesters. But of course, we quickly decided, you know, everybody's seen pictures of protesters, so that wasn't very interesting. So then we found some of the people that worked at the plant that were willing to talk about what was going on there.
So it's just started building gradually, very slowly, huh?
Yes, it evolved, ended up being completely different from what I started out to do.
Want to talk about that evolution at all?
Well, that's one of the creative parts of documentary filmmaking, I think. I mean, you obviously go in with a preconceived notion, but you have to be willing to see what you find and go with what you find and discover what's interesting, and the film sort of makes itself if you're open to it. So.
And that's what you did. You don't go in with any script ahead of time. What about the research that went into this?
Well, the film is heavily researched. We spent even 6 months at the National Archives up in Washington researching pictures of the Savannah River Plant and related things, and spent a lot of time talking to people that worked in the plant and trying to understand all the complex scientific issues involved.
Did you actually transcribe? I mean, I'm assuming then that you went in and you started doing interviews. Did you transcribe your interviews and
Oh yes,
and
you have to transcribe the interviews. That's, you know, time-consuming and it costs a little money, but you have to transcribe the interviews so you know what you're working with.
Speaking of money, and where did you get your funding?
Well, the what helped get the film started was we initially got a very small grant from the Bureau of Cultural Affairs in the city of Atlanta. And after that, we had to just basically scrape up money.
Who was we at this point? Was this you and your friend? Or
Well,
had
it was me and anybody who I could talk into helping me on it. I mean, it was all volunteers.
Yeah.
And it was the kind of project where I just told everybody I was doing it, and anybody that wanted to help in whatever way they could, I welcomed their help. All the crew people worked for free. Everybody worked for free on this thing up until the editing and the post-production.
But at this point, you had another job, right? I mean,
yes.
you had a full-time, you had a day job.
Well, it wasn't a full-time job. It was the kind of job that was flexible. I worked at the World Congress Center driving a forklift for $12 an hour, and I could work a week at a time and then take off a week and work on the film. So, but we had fundraising parties and small foundations. One thing that happened is a lawyer friend of mine in Athens, Georgia, where the University of Georgia is, he threw a little party for us, invited another bunch of lawyers there, and they all were giving $50, $100 each. And one of them was REM's lawyer, the rock group. And so they ended up giving us financial support and even promoting the film in their concerts. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Had some 8th graders come up to me at a screening of the film and say, "Oh, I came to see your film because Michael Stipe told us to." So I thought that was great.
That was good, yeah. At what point did that become, I assume that it kind of took over and became your passion?
Yes.
I mean, you knew that you had to do this. At what point did that happen?
Well, I mean, that happened pretty early on. Once I realized what a good story it was, that we had the guy who had been in charge of all of the radioactive waste management at the Savannah River Plant, one of the top people there, that was willing to sacrifice his whole career in order to talk about what was going on there. He was so appalled at all the radioactive waste just haphazardly being dumped. That right there I knew was a good story. So that's the point at which I really became passionate about it and had to make it, and did whatever it took, and ended up taking 5 years. So.
That was going to be my next question. 5 years in the production.
Yeah.
And collecting money all along as you would go,
That's
and
the main
enlarging your crew. And
right, it's the main reason it takes 5 years is because it's just very difficult to get money for these kinds of things.
how did you go about getting your funding? Besides, you know, the commitments from people who, I guess, saw this as an important issue as you did.
Well, in fact, I did get some support from people right here in Jacksonville, where I grew up. One guy that I went to high school with used to ride the bus to school every day with him. He's now president of a small foundation, Clifford Schultz, and he believed in this from the very beginning, even though I had never made a film. I said, look, I want to make this film. And
he was really taking a chance. Huh?
Yeah.
But your background, I mean, you went to the University of Florida School of Journalism,
right?
So you do have some expertise and
There's still a leap from that
right?
to making a
Yes,
film.
That's true. Yeah. What kind of difficulties did you run into?
Well, they did not want to let us in the plant with a film crew. They told me they don't do that. I mean, this is a top secret place. It's much more security than a military base. They have little tanks riding around the outside of the plant, and 300 guys with M16s walking around the perimeter and all this kind of stuff. They just didn't want to let us in. They promised me some film footage, and they never did come across with it, and I kept bugging them, and basically finally really sort of embarrassed them into letting me take a film crew inside, which we then went inside 5 different times with a film crew. So
how did you embarrass them into doing that, can I ask?
Well, I just made them live up to what they were telling me. By, you know, they promised me film footage and promised me, and I just kept saying, well, where is it, where is it, where is it? And finally said, well, you know, this film footage isn't very good, so why don't you go ahead and bring your film crew over? I mean, some people might, for 2 months on the phone, I was calling them every week, you know.
So once you got inside, then what happened?
Well, then we found these, which you'll see when you see the film, is you see these billowing streams of steam. I mean, the water comes off of the river, is used to cool the reactors, and it's just about boiling. And so you see the river is actually practically boiling. So we found those pictures of the steaming streams, and we found them burying radioactive waste in cardboard boxes and all these kinds of things. So.
And what kinds of difficulties did you run into? I know that there was a lot. You had difficulty getting the information from people. So the people who were working at the plant didn't want to reveal anything. The government agencies that were surrounding, but this was run by, at that point, DuPont was heavily involved in it?
DuPont was running the plant during the production of the film. They had built the plant. In fact, DuPont invented the process of manufacturing nuclear weapons. I don't know how many people know that, but just about the time that the film was released, DuPont walked away from the plant because it was beginning to come out, and the film certainly contributed to that, all the problems with the waste, and they didn't want to be stuck with this huge financial liability.
So you had, and it's now run by Westinghouse.
Westinghouse runs the plant now.
So
correct.
you ran into a lot of censorship problems in just producing the film
Well, yeah,
itself.
it's a top secret place, and the dumping of radioactive waste in a haphazard manner had been kept completely covered up for 40 years under the guise of national security. And so we had to penetrate all of that, but it had become so outrageous that even their people on the inside were wanting to talk about it.
Once the film was finished, you ran into another level of censorship. I think we're talking about censorship here at two levels. One is getting the
Right.
information initially, and then once it was finished, nobody wanted to touch it.
Right, well, that's something maybe I knew it would be hard to make a film on this subject. I hadn't quite anticipated it would be just as hard to get the film distributed and get the film seen. I mean, so we have the film that has all this information about just the dumping of radioactive waste, but then PBS refuses to show it. I mean, the film was made with PBS in mind, and their statement to me was, building bombs does not give adequate voice to the proponents of nuclear arms. And these poor proponents of nuclear arms who've had no access to the media. I mean, this is... So what I began to realize is that big business and nuclear arms manufacturers in particular had so much influence over public television that they were afraid to offend them and show this film. So then we had to engage in a big public campaign that took another 3 years to even get it onto PBS.
So it was 5 years in the making, and then public campaign another 3 years to get it distributed.
Right.
Now, that was quite a complex story in itself, was it not, as to how you organized that and who the people were behind it? You want to talk about that?
Right. Well, another film called Deadly Deception, General Electric, Nuclear Weapons in Our Environment, which was an Academy Award winner last year. Building Bombs was an Academy Award nominee the year before that. They were both distributed theatrically in theaters. And we found that film and paired the two together, and then PBS wouldn't show that one either. Then that's when I began to realize there was a pattern. So at that point, I was in Los Angeles, and I ran into Oliver Stone, and I said to him, I said, you know, I've got this Academy Award nominated film that's been censored by PBS. Well, that immediately got his attention. And so Oliver Stone and Jane Alexander, who's now the head of the National Endowment for the Arts, and David Zucker, who made the Airplane movies, Haskell Wexler, Academy Award-winning cinematographer, they all helped me in getting other celebrities, and a full-page ad was run in Daily Variety, the entertainment trade newspaper, with about 70 celebrities urging PBS to run these films. And so that public pressure campaign that resulted from that caused PBS to change its mind and now run Building Bombs.
However, they didn't run your original program. Is that correct?
Well, I had to edit some things out of the program, and I had been going back and forth with them for 3 years about, they said, well, are you willing to edit it? I said, well, yeah, I'm willing to edit it, but they would never tell me what they didn't like or what, they just wanted me to go ahead and edit and submit an edited version to them, and I said, well, I'm not going to do that on speculation. So finally, when I said, how about if I remove the story of Art Dexter, the physicist who felt guilty about spending his life working on nuclear weapons, well, they jumped on that. So then I realized what they really wanted was just the environmental story, and they didn't want to deal with the bigger moral issues of nuclear weapons production.
Okay, and this fellow, was his name Art Dexter?
Art Dexter.
Art Dexter. So what he represented then was kind of a dilemma in terms of himself and confronting his own...
Right, a moral dilemma in terms of confronting himself, and I think maybe setting an example for other people that might work in the defense industry for questioning what they're doing, because I now realize that a lot of people that work in the defense industry question whether they should be working on things that cause death and destruction, if this is the right thing to do with their lives. And I think putting an example of some guy that walked away from that and said it was wrong on TV for everybody to see, and also raises a moral question about building nuclear weapons that destroy millions of people, that was just something that they didn't want to get into.
Well, of course, we want to see something that had been left out of the original, that's in the original that was left out. Can we show a clip of that?
Yeah, this will be a clip of the part that's been censored by PBS.
Okay, great, thanks.
The number of nuclear weapons in the U.S. arsenal was highly classified. Even Art Dexter had little idea how many there were. Then one day, his high-level security clearance got him an invitation to visit the vault where tritium containers, each representing a number of bombs in the arsenal, were stored. He saw hundreds and hundreds of containers stacked along the walls. He realized that during his years at the plant, the country's stockpile had grown to greater than 30,000 of the bombs dropped on Nagasaki.
It seemed rather obscene. I just could not conceive of our need for that many weapons. And I looked at these containers and walked over and put my hand on one of them and felt the warmth of it. The radioactive decay going on within it served to warm the container. And it was as though each of these had a life of its own. They were a warm entity. It filled me with a sense of revulsion. I went away and felt that I had to do some thinking about what I'd seen and what I was involved in.
Well, that was the program, that was the original program, or a clip from the original program that actually, did the people in Aiken get to see that as to where the plant was in Aiken, South Carolina?
Well, they didn't, when it was on PBS and on the South Carolina PBS network, they didn't see that part, but we did show the film around South Carolina in Aiken when it was first released. It was showed in Charleston, in Aiken, and in Augusta, Georgia, right across from South Carolina. And in fact, Westinghouse officials were so worried about the screenings of the film that we were having there that they sent out a memo to all 15,000 employees about it, and basically implying that this was threatening their jobs.
Huh.
And, you know, the Aiken, South Carolina, it's a little company town. In fact, the editor of the Aiken newspaper had been editor of the Savannah River Plant newspaper. I mean, this is how closely tied in it is. So they only get the pro-plant side of the story, and to get it banged into their head constantly, jobs, 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 and, you know, sweeping the floor there, the bottom job pays $15 an hour.
It's kind of like the mill towns of
Exactly.
South Carolina, North Carolina of long ago, except that the salaries weren't there.
All right, this is the hydrogen bomb town, you
Yeah,
could call it.
right.
So, anyway, so we had many sold-out screenings. I mean, basically, they brought our audience out for us by issuing this memo to them. And we had to schedule extra screenings, and people came in basically a hostile attitude, you know, because they were viewing this as maybe threatening their jobs. But then when they saw the film, and I got this from them after talking to them, they saw that it was their own people from their neighbors, talking their own language, talking truthfully, and it was not some New York expert telling them what to do, and so they were not hostile then coming out of the film, and some of the younger ones were really relating positively to it and so forth. So we got a very positive reaction.
Did they find it disturbing? I mean, the fact that there was a lot of information there that they didn't know.
Oh, yes.
That had not been disclosed to them at all.
Yes, they did find that disturbing. And like I'm saying, particularly the younger people were really concerned and talked to us about it. We get phone calls and letters from people telling, oh, you know, if you think that's bad, here's something else about I know that's going on at the plant.
Oh, gosh.
You know,
so you could do a sequel, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Well, what I'd like to do is show some of those, another clip, some of those disturbing segments from the film, and I think that this clip is in both of them, in the original and in the one that was shown on PBS.
It shows them burying the radioactive waste in cardboard boxes.
It would just take a few seconds and show that. Thanks.
The Energy Department disposes of solid radioactive waste the same way as municipal garbage. They bury it. At the Savannah River Plant, the DuPont Company has buried more than 19 million cubic feet of radioactive waste. That's enough to fill up a 100-story skyscraper the size of a football field.
That is disturbing. I can see where they would be very upset by that. What's happening now there?
Well, now Bill Lawless, who was the guy in charge of this radioactive waste at the plant who quit to expose all of this, he's now on a citizens review panel. In fact, he tells me that building bombs, the fact that the film came out and exposed all these things, basically destroyed the political power of the Department of Energy, and that they're no longer able to get away with disposing of the waste in this kind of way. So I was very gratified by that, because you don't always know if these things that you're doing are really making any
really
difference.
have an effect. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's nice to know. What about monitoring the water, with the aquifer and the river? Is that being done?
Well, yes, they have discovered radioactivity in the river, and in fact, the state of Georgia does regular monitoring in the Savannah River, have found radioactive elements in the fish in the river. Radiation has been dredged up from Savannah Harbor. Cow's milk surrounding the plant has raised levels of tritium, and this is an important issue because children drink a lot of milk, and at a young age they're more vulnerable to radiation. So there is some more monitoring going on. There is more people aware of it. But basically, I don't think the Department of Energy has really come to grips with this yet. I mean, maybe they've been sort of neutralized, but most of their money, even though they're not making nuclear weapons anymore, most of their money still goes into that. They have not shifted over into putting most of their money into cleanup. And when we're talking about cleanup, we're talking $300 billion or more, larger than the savings and loan bailout. And you don't hear Clinton or anybody talking about this. I mean, they haven't even figured this into the deficit yet.
And I think there's another issue there, too, which is awareness, which you certainly did bring to the front. But if they're monitoring and yet not making people aware of the potential problems, I think that's another issue that would need to be addressed.
Well, I agree, and I think only by people staying involved, and regular people, and not leaving it up to the experts or not leaving it up to the government officials. This is what we've sort of been taught to do or learned to do.
The you and me, the
Right.
neighbor, the people down the block.
Right.
The responsibility issue. So if I ask the question, who is responsible, it is...
Well, I think we all have to take responsibility because these things are being done in our name. On the other hand, I think when a big corporation like DuPont operates this place for 30 years, and then once the problems become apparent, wants to just walk away and disavow any responsibility, I think that's obviously wrong. And we need to hold not only DuPont accountable, but the government accountable for allowing that to happen.
And we all need to do that.
Right.
Yes. I've got a personal question to ask you. What kept you going? I mean, you ran into a lot of roadblocks here, initially with the content and then later with the distribution. Where's your motivation? What gave you the courage to continue? And I'm sure sometimes you were discouraged.
Well, basically I'm a truth seeker, I think. And it's like the more they tell me no, and the more I realize it's being covered up, that only encourages me, you see, because so it was a very...
A little feisty.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, I guess I'm sort of a fighter, so, and I can't take no for an answer, I won't be denied. So I just, the more they're hiding and the more they're trying to cover up, the harder I'm digging, so.
And you found other people who felt as committed, obviously, yeah.
Yes, and, we're having this, in a sense, the same battle with PBS now that we had with the Department of Energy. I mean, here's another government bureaucracy where they're using taxpayer money, and they're supposed to be serving the public and giving us information so that we can make decisions about our lives. But because of this big corporate influence on PBS, now they've become very conservative and very safe, and they don't want to show anything that's going to rock the boat. But PBS was created for exactly that kind of programming. So we're getting involved in that now.
What about, how much did you know about radioactivity, or what kind of background did you have in this?
Well, that's funny. I did know something about it because my father is a medical doctor, a radiologist who reads x-rays. My brother is the same thing. And when I was a kid going to school, I did a science experiment with chicken eggs where I exposed chicken eggs that were at different levels of development, closer and closer to actually hatching, to radiation. And then I showed that the genetic damage.
For a science fair, huh?
Right, for a science fair, right, in high school. Showed the damage. I mean, it was very graphically obvious, the damage that was done. So I was aware of that going into this. So that probably prepared me in some way. So it's kind of a weird, strange coincidence that my father's a radiologist and I make a film about nuclear issues.
And did you get support from your family?
Well, yes, my family was very good in supporting me, and in a sense, they're tied to the nuclear establishment, but I think, all of us are concerned about exposure to radiation, and they understood the damage that can come from exposure to radiation. And certainly when you show radioactive waste being buried in cardboard boxes and all the problems, I mean, they obviously were opposed to that. So.
Yeah. Well, the obvious question is, what's next?
Well, I've just executive produced another documentary called Blood Ties, The Life and Work of Sally Mann. It's about the photographer Sally Mann, who's fairly well known and successful, but she's been criticized or attacked by the religious right because some of her photographs are of nudes of her own children who are sometimes nude. I mean, these are in natural settings and so forth, so another controversial subject. And in fact, we've just gotten a grant from a foundation here in Jacksonville to finish that film. It's just been invited to some film festivals, so we're submitting that one for Academy Award nomination. And working on a feature film, a thriller, a mainstream film.
Oh, that's
Maybe it'll come to
interesting.
your local theater. It's called A Pale Blue Kiss. So we've got some movie stars reading the script right now. So we
And
hope
they
to be
now
shooting.
know who you are.
Yes, well, that's true. They do know who I am.
Yeah.
So.
Are you going to continue to work in this area or monitor or follow up with what happened in Savannah, in Aiken?
Well, yes, I'm continuing to follow up. I'm in touch with Bill Lawless, like I said, and just had a conversation with him the other day when Building Bombs was on PBS. These Department of Energy officials he was telling me were very nervous about it, and he was sort of using that to try to make some points about cleaning up the waste at Savannah River. So I'm still in touch with them. And I also am involved out in California. They're trying to set up a nuclear waste dump in Needles, California. And this would be the first waste dump for radiation from nuclear power plants. It would sort of open the floodgates for new nuclear power plants being built. So I'm involved in trying to do something on that situation also.
So once you're involved, you stay involved.
Well, I guess they consider me an expert now. So.
I think it's very interesting, and I hope that everyone gets an opportunity to see the program. Thank you so much for joining us today,
Well, thank you,
Mark.
Kathy. It's
I
great to be here.
really do appreciate it, and thank you. This has been worth quoting.